state of business analysis and where is business analysis going to? Well, I'm doing a series of podcasts to talk with people from different places in the world, trying to understand how we are today and what's the future. And these episodes guests, he specializes at the intersection of agile delivery, lean practices, continuous improvement, and data-driven decision making. A certified product owner and dynamic business analyst with a strong record of leading cross-functional teams in Australia, in the UK, the Middle East, and India. Welcome, Erfan Afthab. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Erfan, let's start by talking about your career. How did you end up into business analysis?
Oh, that's a very good question. So I started business analysis 16 years back when I was working in a team which was focusing on the operations side of things, and that's when someone came to me and asked that the system and in end to end, how the system works, how user journey is, and then how the application itself works. I think you can do this job. And when I heard that, I wasn't sure. And this was the first time I was hearing about business analysis. I didn't know about it. And then I did some research and came back and said, no, I don't want to do it, because the people I asked about business analysis, oh, that's all about gathering requirements and documenting them in spreadsheets or Word documents. Then that's when I had my line manager, who is also my mentor, told me that it's not just about gathering requirements. It's all about understanding people's pain points and customers' pain points, and then trying to find a solution to that, building that solution in the right way, and then bringing into their hands that right solution, and then gathering feedback on that. So it's an end-to-end life cycle where the business analyst works. The gathering the requirement is just one part of it. So that's when I got interested in it, because the whole reason why I picked up this career is because I wanted to solve problems. And in whatever way it is, whether it is coding or testing a solution or documenting the requirements or eliciting the requirements that the user didn't tell us, digging deeper into their needs and wants. So that's how I basically jumped into business analysis without knowing much about it, just getting a very broad definition of what the role looks like. But now looking back after 16 years, I don't regret the decision. So, yeah.
That's a good one. And interestingly, you brought us a little bit about the value of business analysis. You told you wanted to solve problems. You wanted to create some value. How would you define the value of business analysis for someone who, as you were 16 years ago, and didn't know what it was, and was just thinking it was about documenting requirements? How would you frame it for someone who is just coming to this discipline or trying to understand this profession? How would you frame what business analysis is?
The simplest way I describe the value of business analysis is this. Business analysis exists to reduce the cost of building the wrong thing. So many organizations are very capable of building solutions quickly, especially in today's world where AI is helping you vibe code, and anyone can code and build solutions. It is really easy to, I wouldn't say easy, it is possible to build solutions quickly. But if the underlying problem isn't clearly understood, that effort can easily be wasted. So good business analysis helps clarify the real problem, align stakeholders before development begins, and define requirements in a way that can actually be tested. So when BA or business analysis is done well, you typically see fewer late-stage surprises and faster iteration cycles. So that's the value I see in business analysis. And that also relates to how business analysis has transformed as a job when Agile took over from Waterfall. Because what Agile did is it just redistributed the tasks, and some of the tasks went to product owners, some of them went to engineers, some of them went to testers. But the harder part, which is stakeholder alignment, user needs, all those still stayed with the BA. So I think that's how I would define value for of business analysis to someone.
For a lot of people, they don't see the business analyst as a role into agile, especially because Scrum have become very popular, and Scrum doesn't define business analyst as a role into the framework. But you're just telling us that business analyst is a key role into agile. Where do you see the business analyst in agile? Inside the development team, outside of the project team, and looking for the whole? How do you see this role into an agile organization?
It's an interesting question and a discussion as well, because one of the things which I feel which we miss out when it comes to Scrum or Agile is the concept of the team, which includes product owner, Scrum Master, and the engineers, which also includes testers, by the way. Is that these names, product owner, Scrum Master, they were created in an Agile context. So what that means is that those are names of people who will play a role. But who plays that role from a designation point of view can be decided by the team and by the organization. What I mean by to say is that a business analyst can play the role of a product owner, because they both do similar things, like understanding the business problems, knowing what the product vision is, and then aligning it to a strategy, and then writing your lower level requirements from it, and then explaining it to the team. So you are basically doing what a business analyst does in the waterfall world, let me call it that way. So product owner, Scrum Master, these are all terms that are roles played by people who are part of the team. Now, an engineer can be a product owner if imagine you're building a technical product like an API, for example. You don't need a business product owner or a business analyst itself who is more inclined to the business side of things than the technical side of things. You can be an engineer who is technically sound, also can speak the language that the different people in the team are members of the team are can understand. So I feel the designation that we have as per what the company structure is, organization structure is, doesn't have to mix with or match with the roles that you play in a Scrum team. So I think that's where business analysts can play any of those roles. Now, the question about whether they should be within a team or not, or outside the team, depends on what we consider a team in a Scrum. In my opinion, the BA should be part of the team and should be attending all the daily stand-ups and all the Scrum events that we know about. Because unless you are closely integrated with the team and you're working within a cross-functional team, you're always going to miss some context, which will be highly critical to building the right solution for the right problem.
Let's bring it to the practical side. It's interesting that you have worked in very different scenarios. You have worked in Middle East, in UK. You're now working in Australia. You have worked in India. Do you see a different way of business analysts working into those different countries, or is there a similarity? How do you see business analysis played in different organizations, contexts, scenarios? You mentioned waterfall, agile as a different context. What flavors of business analysis did you experience out there?
Yeah. So in terms of similarities, what I've seen is that the core skill that a business analyst should have, which is problem framing, stakeholder alignment, and translating requirements from business problems into technical speak, that has remained the same throughout in all the geographies across this many number of years, be it waterfall, be it Scrum. What has changed is with these different methodologies coming in, different versions of the methodologies coming in. For example, in Agile, you have Scrum and Kanban and all that. there are different ways in which you run your day to day. That's what has changed. So in Waterfall, you used to create business requirement document within which you will have functional specification, non-functional specification, all those sort of stuff. When it came to Scrum, you translated them into user stories. As a user, I want this so that I can do that. And then you created acceptance criteria under that. Now, when I work in Sydney, in Australia, what has happened is also because of the emergence of AI products and AI native products, which I work on, the way the requirements are written have changed so much. And it's very interesting to be in that space as a business analyst because it's a mindset shift from the way we were writing business requirements in the past. And we can touch upon that if you're keen to.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. Tell us a little bit more about how you're writing requirements today using AI,
Mhm.
and how did the role of the business analyst change it into this scenario?
So there are two aspects to this. One is if you're using AI in your day-to-day work, and then the other aspect is if you're building an AI product. If you're using AI in your day-to-day work, how it has changed. There are a lot of tasks that you can get AI to do. You can use the right prompts. For example, you can use a prompt to create user stories. So imagine you were able to write 20 user stories in a day in the past. Now you could write, I don't know, 50 or 60 user stories in a day because AI is writing it. You just need to give the input for that, the right input for that, and then review the output.
Okay.
That's on the side where your day to day is changing. Day to day work has changed because of AI. The other part where you are working on AI products, what has changed and what I would like to touch upon is that previously your requirements were either this works well, like works in the way we expect, or it doesn't work. So the acceptance criteria had, this must work like this must happen, this must happen. And the QA team or the testing team, what they do is, they look at the acceptance criteria. Does this happen? No, then it's a bug. So it was very much deterministic. What has happened with the AI products is the same model can give different responses, although most times it is accurate, different responses. So the output is non-deterministic or probabilistic. What that means is you can only define what good enough looks like. So those are thresholds. So like you can say this should be 98% accurate. You can't achieve 100% accuracy because to the same model, if you give the same prompt, you may not get the same response every time. So that way the requirements have changed. So your acceptance criteria are not like must be this, must be that, or must not be this. Rather, it is more like like probabilistic kind of evaluation metrics. So what happens is you give them, you define what good enough looks like, and then you define metrics to evaluate that. What does that good enough mean to you, and when would you consider something good enough? So, for example, accuracy, semantics, all those kind of things. So that's the way the requirement documentation itself has changed.
That's interesting. Let me bring it back because you mentioned two different areas where AI is impacting. So, the first one I would call it AI for BA, that's using artificial intelligence to do business analysis. And you mentioned that you can increase very hardly your productivity, creating a lot of more user stories or acceptance criteria in a day because you're using AI. That doesn't mean AI is doing your job because
Mm.
you are running behind it, you're defining the prompts, you are validating what's being created, but makes you very faster.
Yeah.
And I want to question you about this before we go to the second one. One problem some teams had in the past is that sometimes the specifications that were being done by the business analysts were not being followed or very much used as they should by the development team. Like they were
Mm.
not paying so much attention on documentation. And my question is, what happens if now we have three times more documents than we had before? So you mentioned the value of BA is not just doing the documentation, solving problem. How should we address the issue of now having 3 times more documents because AI is creating those documents and people starting to say, I'm not going to read it, it was just created by AI or something like that. I don't know if you had this issue in your teams already or if you had something like that.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is when it comes to AI output or output created by AI, there is always the trust factor which comes into picture. But then
Yeah.
what we need to understand here is whether AI creates it or I creates it. If it goes from me, it is my responsibility to ensure accuracy of the content. So one thing which I have to be careful about is whether if I use an AI product to create my user story, I still need to read through that and make sure there isn't any, fluff or things you can't test. That's the measure, right? Things you can't test should not be there. So those definitions of a user story still stands. Only thing which has changed is the numbers won't be like 100% or very much absolute. There will be a probabilistic aspect to it. In terms of documentation, that's another shift which I'm seeing lately, which is moving away from a lot of or documentation of fixed requirements to things which change over time as the solution evolves. This kind of aligns with the agile way of working, but then it also goes against some of the ways of working we used to have in the past, where you have requirements and anything which is outside that is a scope creep and things like that, and then there needs to be a change request, those kind of change management aspects of it. But then that's where uh, the ways of working also needs to evolve with how the software development methods or practices have evolved. So in any organization where that doesn't happen, there is always going to be this concern of too much documentation versus less documentation. Have we got all the requirements signed off? Can we start development now? Versus we have the high level understanding of the requirements. Now we kind of work on it and iterate, and as we figure out new things, we pivot or adjust that. And the other thing is, in a Scrum setup, you have a cross-functional team. In Quantium, for example, I work with engineers, data scientists, and product managers. And there are products which are where I've worked on applications. There are integrations that I've worked on. I've worked on data platforms and AI-driven products. So all these four types of products that I've worked on definitely need a level of flexibility in the way we work around things. So that's where, instead of focusing more on documenting fixed requirements, how can we agree on the overall problem, understand the problem clearly, and when it comes to solutions, instead of having solutions which we can't change, see how we can have the assumption that solution could evolve, but also what identify the value versus effort aspect of it. Because if your solution initially started with, say, web application, and then eventually it went and it landed in a mobile application, that's not a good way of iterating, right? So there is something really wrong about you have understood about your users there. Because if you thought that you wanted to start with web application and then you ended up at a mobile application, you don't really know your users and their preferences. And that again goes back to the problem of not identifying or understanding the problem in its entirety.
Yeah. Interesting, you mentioned accountability for the documentation. So AI is not accountable for whatever you're doing. You are the accountable for that, and so
Yeah,
if people recognize you as the accountable, it's not AI documentation, it's your documentation, it's the
yeah,
business analyst documentation. And you also mentioned responsibility because you are not the unique responsible for the documentation. Although
correct.
you are the accountable one, you are connecting different viewpoints on this documentation, and it's not a static documentation but a live documentation, dynamic, which is always learning from those different perspectives. So making that possible is what make it valuable and what make it keeps on the target and not deviate
Correct.
as the solution evolves. Very nice. Let me bring you back to the second part of your answer, your previous answer. You already mentioned AI for BA, so artificial intelligence, use it for business analysis. Now, the other side is when you are using business analysis for artificial intelligence solutions. And you mentioned this difference, this very key difference between having a deterministic solution, which is simple computer science when you have a logic, and have a probabilistic solution that is provided by AIs, especially large language models and kind of machine learning. And so you define your requirements based on a threshold and not a specific answer.
Correct.
Would you say that it's also part of the BA to understand the differences between these two different types of mechanisms of solving problems and addressing them appropriately? Like, if I'm asking for identification of a picture and trying to understand if this is Erfan or Fabricio, I could use AI for that, and a threshold would be the because it's not gonna make everything all times right. But if I'm asking for a balance in your bank account, I should not have a threshold for that. That should be deterministic, and I should use a different technology for that. But that's kind of part of the architecture. How does a BA influences or talk with the architecture team, trying to understand those different technologies and conducting those discussions? Is it part of our job?
Yeah. So I think firstly, great question, and you touched on a very important point, which is, but even when we are building AI products, it's not just AI or non-deterministic probabilistic thing, right? So I worked on a product, for example, an AI feature in which this exact scenario came in. Like, I knew this number should be, say, 20, and it should be 20. If it is not 20, that's wrong. But then, based on that 20, what insight you create out of it, that can be differing. I mean, vary a bit. So that is where the evaluation metrics that you come up with needs to be in such a way that the thing that you can be deterministic about, you should have that kind of, it shouldn't be a threshold, or even if it is threshold, it should be 100%, for example. And the other situation where you have non-deterministic output, that's where you go into the language, the tone, that kind of thing. So it's a mix of both. And when you're writing a requirement, you would know specifically in this example which I gave. So when I'm writing saying that, as a user, this number should be this much, so that I can do the rest of the work, or draw insights from it, then my acceptance criteria should be saying that this must be this much, and this is the calculation. So based on this calculation, this is what you get. And then you can also give some examples, right? I mean, simulation of some numbers and what would be the expected output. So that you can do. But when you come to the other side, where based on this number 20, what is the insight that you're drawing, that's where you can write the other kind of user story. So it's basically, like you mentioned, the business analyst should be able to identify what is the input, what is the output, and is the output something deterministic or not. If it is deterministic, your requirement should be like how you used to do it for the traditional softwares, and the other one should be the other way, right? And that brings me to the very important point, which is one of the key shifts I'm seeing with BA business analysis is the need for data literacy.
The need
So
for?
data literacy.
All
So
right.
what data literacy, especially in data-driven organizations, business analysts who cannot engage directly with data become less effective. Modern BAs, I think, need to be comfortable exploring data sets, questioning assumptions with evidence, and validating whether requirements actually reflect the reality. And when you do all this is when you actually understand, okay, this part, maybe I can come up with deterministic or must do this, must be this kind of requirements. Whereas, okay, this part, I don't think I can do that. There might be variations because of the model. And then you have to accordingly change your acceptance criteria. So it's a mix of both depending on what kind of features you work on. And it's for the BA. Firstly, it is the responsibility of a business analyst to do that, because who else can bring clarity around when you translate from business problems into technical speak, right? So I don't see anyone else who is better placed to do that job than a business analyst. And secondly, when we do that, it's not one or the other. It's actually a mix of both, depending on what kind of requirement you are documenting.
And as you mentioned before, you're not doing this alone. You are connecting different roles and different experts to do this kind of
Correct.
job, and you are in the right position for connecting those and
Yeah.
having all them speaking the same language. That was really interesting, Erfan. I learned a lot today, and it's nice to see how business analysis is evolving, not throwing away what we had to do before we use it to do, but evolving and creating additional layers into our competences. Thank you very much for sharing. If someone who is watching us today wants to reach out with you, chat, what's the best way for connecting with you?
I think the best way would be LinkedIn. I'm very much active there. So yeah, drop in a message and then we can have a chat.
Perfect. I'm gonna add your LinkedIn profile below this video. If someone wants to connect, just click on this video. For those who are watching us now, thank you very much for joining. As I'm doing a good conversation here with Erfan, I have done some previous ones you can watch on the history, and I'm still doing with other experts all around the globe talking about business analysis. Thank you for joining, and see you in the next session. Thank you, Erfan.
Thank you.